Good morning, everyone. We start off the show with a key milestone in the U.S. vaccine effort. Johnson & Johnson's single-shot COVID vaccine has been found to be effective before FDA review. This is the third inoculation to seek emergency use authorization or emergency use clearance, in the country, with external FDA advisors meeting Friday to consider recommendation. Here to discuss is senior scholar with the Hopkins Center for Health Security, Dr. Amish Adalja. Also, Bloomberg senior healthcare editor, Drew Armstrong. Drew, thanks for being here too. Dr. Adalja, I want to start with you. I'm wondering how this news this morning from the FDA changes the recovery and getting us out of this pandemic.
I think it's great news from the FDA, but it's likely to be more backloaded, as Dr. Fauci says, because there are maybe only 4 million Johnson & Johnson doses on hand. So there's not a lot to really add to capacity, but any addition to capacity is going to be something that's very welcome. But this is a vaccine that's single dose that doesn't require extreme cold chain, keeping it at cold temperatures. So this is something that we will see accelerate vaccinations. It's just we need more doses on hand to be able to actually put them to good use. But it is something that's unequivocally good news.
Hey, Drew, jump on in here. Your team has been very closely analyzing the rollout of vaccine, not just here in the U.S., but around the world. How does this change the timeline for widespread inoculation here in the U.S.?
So I think the good news here is that, as the doctor mentioned, we've had the administration kind of talking down some of the J&J production, but one of the things that they told Congress yesterday was that, yes, they will only have 4 million doses when they kick this off, but they'll deliver 20 million doses through the month of March, and then stuck to their commitment to deliver an additional 80 million doses, which is 80 million people, over the 3 months following. If you combine that with what's already been delivered and what's scheduled to be delivered from Pfizer and Moderna, you're talking about enough vaccine coverage for around 130 million people in the U.S. They obviously have to meet those commitments, and no problems have to happen, which I think the pandemic has taught us, frequently is not the case. But that is a very big number, and I think it's a bigger number than a lot of people expected and that the administration has even been talking about.
One number, I think, too, Dr. Adalja, that a lot of people are going to focus on with this news is 72%. The vaccine was 72% effective in a U.S. clinical trial. FDA staff wrote in a document summarizing the company's trial data that confirms findings that J&J released earlier this month. What would you say to someone who says, wait a second, the vaccines from Pfizer and BioNTech and from Moderna, those are over 90% effective. I'd rather get one of those or 2 shots of those 1 month apart than the J&J vaccine?
I would tell them that they're likely wrong. I would take whatever vaccine is available. We're in a public health emergency. And remember that when you look at the primary endpoints of these trials, they were symptomatic infection. That's not really what matters. When it comes to these vaccines, what matters is serious illness, hospitalization, and death. And I think they are all basically equivalent at the ability to do that, even in the face of variants. So I think that there's this idea that we can make COVID go away and disappear. That's not the case. What we're trying to do is tame this virus through vaccines. And all of these vaccines, including the AstraZeneca vaccine, have the ability to tame the virus. And that's what we want a vaccine to do. So I would say get whatever vaccine is available to you as soon as it is available to you.
Drew, 1 shot versus 2 shots here. How big of a game changer is that?
Really meaningful. First of all, you only have to manufacture half as many doses when you're doing a 1 shot. You need half as many vaccine appointments, half as many nurses or doctors or anybody who's doing vaccinations. And then, the other thing that you're talking about there is, the rollout is easier. It's, half as many FedEx trucks, half as many people unloading stuff, half as much refrigerator space. Cutting things in half is, it's really simple, but it makes life a lot easier when you only have to do something once. This is a meaningful thing in terms of the speed and volume of vaccinations we're talking about here. It just makes the logistical aspects of this, that much easier.
Hey, Dr. Adalja, what do people have to know about the differences between how the Johnson & Johnson vaccine, what's actually in it versus the mRNA vaccines that have been available for a couple months already here in the U.S.?
So this uses a totally different type of technology. It uses another virus, basically a common cold-causing virus, an adenovirus, which everybody's had. It uses one of those adenovirus that's basically engineered to express the spike protein of the coronavirus. So it's not going to be the same as the mRNA vaccine. It's another vaccine platform that many people were really excited about, that's really getting a chance to show that it can work. And it's going to be something that has a little bit of a different side effect profile. If you look at the trial data, they didn't have those serious allergic reactions with the Johnson & Johnson vaccine. And that may be due to the fact that it's using a different technology and it doesn't require the cold storage, as your other guests mentioned. And that may be because it's a little bit easier to store because it's not using those lipid nanoparticles, it's not using mRNA. So there are some differences, and I think we'll see as we vaccinate more people how it fares overall in adverse reactions and the side effects and the muscle aches and pains versus the Moderna and the Pfizer versions. But they're not going to be identical because they're different technologies. And I think it's good that we had multiple shots on goal with different technologies.
But is it a technology that's been used in humans before, Dr. Adalja?
It's been used in other types of vaccines. So, for example, they've used adenoviruses in Ebola vaccines. There were HIV vaccine trials that use adenoviruses. The Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine uses a different adenovirus. The Sputnik vaccine in Russia uses an adenovirus. So yes, this virus, the adenovirus, this common cold-causing virus, is considered a common carrier to be used in vaccine platforms. So it's been something that's been studied for a long time before we've seen the Johnson & Johnson vaccine use it for COVID.
Drew, unfortunately, there has been some vaccine hesitancy in this country and other countries as well when it comes to the mRNA vaccines. Given that this technology has been used in other vaccines when it comes to the Johnson & Johnson vaccine, do you think that this will help increase the number of people who might have been on the fence before about getting a vaccine and say, wait a second, I'm not so much on the fence now because this is technology that's been used before?
Yeah, so I think it's important to keep in mind that, yes, we have seen vaccine hesitancy. This happened in some of the nursing homes, though I will say, I think it's worth assuming that vaccine hesitancy is not static. One of the comments I heard from the woman who runs the nursing home program at the CDC was that there were a lot of staff who on the first visit to a nursing home might say, I don't want to be a guinea pig for this. But on the second visit to a nursing home when they came back, we're saying, okay, give me my first dose. So, vaccine hesitancy can change as people see that these are safe and that are reducing infection. So I think it's really important to keep in mind the idea that, this is a problem that can move and be altered as people get more familiar with these and just over time. The second thing that I think we really do need to keep in mind is that, yes, there is vaccine hesitancy out there, but also just about every available dose of this stuff that it's practical to use is making it in people's arms. We are in a supply-limited environment when it comes to vaccine right now. We are not in a demand-limited environment when you look at in terms of the number of things that are going out there and what's going into arms. These things are getting used, and I think most people, if you hear listening anecdotally, no one is saying, "Oh, I'm ending the day with lots and lots of unused vaccine," because people are turning this down. You've got people lining up outside grocery stores, hoping that there will be leftover overdoses. That will probably change in the future, and we'll have to do more outreach to get that done. But that is not the world we live in right now.
Hey, Dr. Adalja, I've been having this conversation a lot with friends over the past couple of weeks as more and more people get vaccinated. The main question is, when can my parents come visit our kids? When can grandma and grandpa come and visit? Because more people over the age of 65 in the United States are getting vaccinated. But at the same time, younger people aren't because they're not yet, a priority to be vaccinated. When is it safe for people to start getting together again if more and more of the population is getting vaccinated?
So I think if two people are vaccinated on the same time scale, that they've got vaccinated around the same time, it's been 2 weeks since their second dose, there's no problem with two vaccinated people hanging out at all. And I think if you're a vaccinated person, you are likely going to be able to do most of your activities that you've done before, that you don't really have a risk of getting serious infection or getting hospitalized. So I think that we have to be optimistic about this vaccine, that it is a way to reclaim your life. And there's a lot of people who are really trying to focus on asymptomatic infections. And the data coming from Israel does show that these vaccines do block asymptomatic infection. So I think we can't keep underselling these vaccines.
Yeah.
That if you're vaccinated and it's been 2 weeks, you're likely not very much of a risk to anybody else. And you definitely don't have a risk of the coronavirus. So I do think that you should be trying to resume whatever activities you feel comfortable doing without really being worried about it. It's going to take some time for the public health guidance to change, for masks, for example, and for other types of mass gatherings. But in general, these vaccines are very are huge tools that are going to improve your lives. That's the reason you're getting vaccinated, is to go back to your life. So I think that we have to be, honest with the public and say this is what the prospect that we're facing. And there's a lot of doomsayers out there that are undermining the vaccines, and it's causing vaccine hesitancy because people say, well, why should I get vaccinated if it doesn't change anything? But it does change things. And I think we have to see the guidance move that way. But in general, yes, I think your risk from COVID-19 basically goes very low, less than 5% of symptomatic disease, and basically 0% for serious illness, hospitalization, or death if you get vaccinated. So I say, go ahead and visit your grandchildren, do what you were doing before, and don't be worried about it.
All right, I love it. Don't be worried about it. Let's end with that good news there. Senior scholar with the Hopkins Center for Health Security, Dr. Amish Adalja. Also, Bloomberg senior healthcare editor, Drew Armstrong. A big thank you to both of you guys for your time. We should note that the Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health is supported by Michael R. Bloomberg, founder of Bloomberg LP and Bloomberg Philanthropies.